Good afternoon, students. I'm bringing you an introductory lesson on Derek Walcott and his book of poetry, Humorous. We met Derek Walcott in semester 1 and we studied him as a playwright. We looked at the play Tijan and His Brothers. In semester 2, we'll take that same introduction and it's going to work. So you just need to go back to those pages. And so here's where we begin this semester. I have a textbook here that works as secondary reading. And like I said, secondary reading helps you to understand what the primary text presents. Now, this book is called A Caribbean Life, Derek Walcott, A Caribbean Life. So here I have the title in italics. It was written in 2002 by Bruce King. So Walcott doesn't write about himself. It's Bruce King who is doing the writing. So whatever we take from this book, we'll have to attribute it to King 2000. Now, King places Derek Walcott within a modernist tradition. So the terms modernist and modernism describe Walcott's style of writing. We would have talked about Shakespearean drama, Shakespearean sonnets. And now, when we think of the work produced by Walcott, it's modernist poetry, modern poetry. I'll give you some of the quotations that I've extracted from Bruce King's text, and I've tried to give you page numbers. It will help you. And it's for you to take what you want that helps you understand. And so most of it, I've just given you it as it is in the book. The book is about 400 pages. And so I've done the preliminary reading for you and I've extracted what might be relevant. So King 2000 on page 38 says, there is the regular and varied mixing of rhymes with other less obvious forms of harmonization at line ends. So it's quite a long breadth of what Bruce King says. He produces his analysis. He has worked with the poetry, and so he's quite capable and qualified of criticizing. And so he says that his lines are irregular and varied, the lines in the poetry. With these lines, Walcott mixes different kinds of rhymes with other kinds of less obvious. And what is the effect of the rhymes? A harmonization. Next, he says there is a strong argumentative structure within what is really a lyric. So it's lyrical poetry with unresolved contradictions. Elsewhere, you'll find Walcott's poem described as a modern epic. Epic. King also says that the syntax sometimes results in some obscurity. I think I missed the quotation closing mark here. So oftentimes we probably will get 90% of positive criticism. And if there is something that's distracting or troubling, no problem if the critic points it out. And so this critic says the syntax, meaning how the grammar works and the noun phrase and the verb phrase, could result in some obscurity. You could work through it and see what you get, if you agree. So why I give you these statements, it's not for you to just swallow them whole. It's for you when you're reading Omerus to determine if these are justified. And maybe you're going to find your examples for justification. King also says the cadenced phrases and lines He pronounces on the cadence, phases, and lines which have their own movement. Bruce King draws attention to the fact that Walcott is both an artist and a poet. And here's what he says. There is a background to Walcott that you could find. Here is the website. King says that Walcott would need to earn his living as a writer. He would continue painting while wishing that he had the same natural talent for it as he had for words. And his interest in painting would influence his poetry and theater. The poems would be, and here you have it, filled with descriptions, filled with colors, perspectives, distinctions between the foreground, the background, the middle distance. And Walcott would adapt such painterly genres as the still life. And so, drawing the connection, we might see something from the artist reflected in his poetry. Again, as artist and poet, King says, there was intense light for the work of art. There were broken shadows, there were canoes. He would draw the coconut palms. Colors, they were far different from the dull industrial colors of two other poets, Audien and Eliot, and of course they're European. And so the colors in European art, they don't tend to be as bright with so much light as in the Caribbean. The attention to Walcott's poetry gives to the natural world, especially to describing St. Lucia. The attention Walcott poetry gives derives from his paintings. That's what King says. He said in his poetry he uses a pen as a brush. The word and the color of tropical St. Lucia contrasted significantly with depressed grays of post-war England. Now he gives comments on writer's craft. He says Walcott makes use of overlapping levels of diction, analogy, metaphor, perspectives, and traditions. His work naturally accommodates and uses puns, paradoxes, contrasts, contradictions. And here I give you the page reference. And here is another comment, but because I am recording for you, I'm going to go swiftly and you could do it in your time and you could pause. Bruce King also points to the relationship with the Greek epic tradition. And this Greek epic tradition, it kind of informs Walcott's writing. He says Walcott had inherited a modernism which embodied experimentation, ambiguity, and difficulty. He said, Homerus showed, this is the poem, it showed that the Caribbean was what the Greeks were like originally. The Greeks were the niggers of the Mediterranean. I'm skipping again because my time is going swiftly. Now, looking at the form of the poem and comparing it with European poetry, English poetry, older traditions, attention is given to the pentameters and heroic couplets. These are quite absent from Walcott's modernist verse. And here's what Bruce King says, the pentameter would have been too heroic. He said instead, Walcott wanted something closer to instinct and rhyme. To defend instincts is like defending breathing. He wanted the meter of someone exhaling in and out while working. He doesn't want rhyme bumping at the end. I'm skipping again, but here is something about free verse, and Walcott probably rejected free verse too, but see what you make of it. And now, when we look at the content in Walcott's poetry, what do we get? King says Walcott saw history as endless conquests, of which most peoples have been guilty. So it's about conquerors and conquered. Walcott expressed his concern with the treatment of Indians and blacks in America. I have no quotation marks here because this is something I have in my head because I did some research on it. Therefore, in Omerus, you find things like disillusionment as a strong theme, and you will find wounding as a strong theme. And these are my observations from work that I did. Walcott, in his writing, encourages the Caribbean subject to stop dreaming of going home, dreaming of going back to Africa, or dreaming of going back to India. Another point, in Omerus, there is this cubist montage of contrasting voices and information. See if you find that as you work through the poems. And I'm at the last slide now. The poem also addresses the theme of nature and the environment. And maybe the large question is, what are we doing to the environment? Walcott is he's on record for criticizing the sale of the pitons. What do we mean by pitons? These natural mountains here in the landscape, and there's a beautiful bay there, and this is in St. Lucia. It was going to be sold to a group of Iranians who wanted to put a hotel somewhere right up there, you know? And Walcott says, no, that's not going to be the best use of landscape and environment. Walcott says if you do that, you're desecrating the environment. And maybe there is an equivalent to Walcott's argument with what is presently happening in Guyana here, the removal of the mangroves to create a shore base for the oil industry. And so the large question is it okay to destroy the environment in the name of development? So here the argument is that hotels will bring tourists and will bring money and it will bring work. Similarly, in Guyana, the argument is that oil and gas is booming and Guyana is going to be developed. It's going to change the whole economic state of Guyana. And therefore, if we need to build a shore base here, remove all of the mangroves, all of it. So it's for you to develop a critical perspective. And here I've given you a link to something that I wrote on meditating on the fate of the earth and its species. And I looked at Wilson Harris's novel Jonestown to see what humans have done to environment. With this introduction, I really hope that you would enjoy working with Derek Walcott's book of poetry, Omerus. I'm going to have some Zoom lessons where I'm going to walk you through and help you understand what happens in his poetry. Thank you.